It was one of those perfect Saturday afternoons when the sun felt just right, and the whole city seemed to be in a good mood. The downtown area was packed with people enjoying their weekend, and the smell of fresh coffee and grilled food filled the air. Inside Romano's family restaurant, every table was full. Families laughed together. Couples whispered over candlelit tables, and the sound of clinking glasses mixed with cheerful conversations. Through the front door walked a young Marine in his dress blue uniform. His name was James, and he'd just come from a ceremony honoring veterans at the local community center. The uniform was crisp and perfectly pressed, with rows of colorful ribbons on his chest that told stories of sacrifice and service. He wasn't trying to draw attention to himself. In fact, he felt a bit self-conscious still wearing the uniform in public, but he hadn't had time to change before meeting a friend for lunch. The hostess smiled warmly at him and said there would be a short wait for a table. James nodded and stood near the entrance, checking his phone to see if his friend had sent any messages. The restaurant buzzed with the comfortable noise of a busy Saturday crowd. Everything seemed normal and peaceful, but near the back corner of the restaurant, two men sat at a table that was already cluttered with empty beer bottles. Their voices had been getting louder for the past 20 minutes, and nearby diners were starting to notice. The older of the two, a heavy-set man with graying hair named Tommy, kept making comments that made the people at the next table uncomfortable. His companion, a thinner man called Bobby, laughed too loudly at everything Tommy said, clearly past the point of responsible drinking. When the hostess finally led James to a table, it happened to be right next to where Tommy and Bobby were sitting. As James walked past them, he heard Tommy's voice drop to what he probably thought was a whisper but was actually loud enough for half the room to hear. "Look at that," Tommy muttered to Bobby. "Probably borrowed that uniform for some kind of discount or attention." James heard the comment but chose to ignore it. He'd dealt with this kind of thing before, though thankfully not often. He sat down and picked up the menu, trying to focus on deciding between the pasta special and the grilled chicken. His friend had texted that he was running 15 minutes late, stuck in traffic, but Tommy wasn't finished. He turned in his chair to face James directly, his voice now intentionally loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Hey, where'd you get that uniform? Army surplus store?" The conversations at the surrounding tables began to fade. People looked up from their plates, sensing trouble brewing. James set down his menu and took a slow breath. He'd been trained to stay calm under pressure, to think before reacting, to never let emotions control his actions. That training was being tested right now. "Sir, I'm just here to have lunch," James said quietly, meeting Tommy's eyes with a steady gaze. "I'd appreciate it if you'd let me do that." Tommy pushed his chair back and stood up, wobbling slightly. Bobby grabbed his arm as if to steady him, but then stood up too, almost like he felt obligated to back up his friend. Tommy moved closer to James's table, pointing at the ribbons and medals on his chest. "Those medals? I bet you don't even know what they're for. Probably bought the whole thing online." His words were slurred but full of venom. "People like you, always pretending to be something you're not, taking advantage of real heroes." The entire restaurant had gone quiet now. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A child's question to his mother went unanswered as she stared at the unfolding scene. The bartender stopped pouring drinks. Even the kitchen noise seemed to dim. Everyone was watching, their phones already out, fingers hovering over record buttons. James remained seated, his hands flat on the table in front of him. Every muscle in his body was tense, but his face showed remarkable calm. He knew that in a situation like this, any aggressive move on his part would be captured on camera and twisted into something it wasn't. He also knew that these men were drunk and looking for a fight, and giving them what they wanted would only make everything worse. "Gentlemen," James said, his voice steady and quiet but somehow carrying across the silent restaurant, "I don't want any trouble. I'm asking you respectfully to leave me alone." Bobby laughed, a harsh sound that made several people flinch. "Respectfully? You hear this guy? Acting all proper now." He reached out and actually touched one of the medals on James's uniform, his fingers grazing the metal. That's when James moved, not violently, but with practiced precision. He stood up smoothly and stepped back, putting distance between himself and the two men. His hand came up in a clear stop gesture. "Do not touch my uniform again," he said, and something in his tone made even Tommy pause for a second. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was the voice of someone who had real authority. real experience, and real control over himself. The restaurant manager, a young woman who looked barely out of college, finally rushed over from the front desk. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she approached. "Gentlemen, please, let's all just calm down here," she said. Though her voice cracked with nervousness, Tommy ignored her completely. His attention fixed on James. The crowd held its breath, dozens of phones now openly recording, waiting to see what would happen next in this confrontation that had turned a peaceful Saturday lunch into something nobody expected. And then, from across the restaurant, a chair scraped against the floor. The sound of that chair scraping against the floor cut through the tension like a knife. Everyone's head turned toward the noise. An elderly man was standing up from his table near the window, using his cane to steady himself. He had white hair and wore a simple button-down shirt with a baseball cap. Most people in the restaurant probably assumed he was just another customer getting ready to leave, wanting to escape the uncomfortable situation that was unfolding. But this man wasn't leaving. He was walking straight toward the confrontation. His steps were slow and deliberate, the cane tapping rhythmically against the floor. There was something about the way he carried himself, even with the limp, that commanded attention. The whole restaurant watched as he made his way across the room, past empty chairs and curious onlookers, heading directly toward Tommy, Bobby, and James. When he finally reached them, he positioned himself right between the drunk men and the young Marine. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with his cane planted firmly on the ground, looking Tommy straight in the eye. Up close you could see the lines on his face, the weathered skin of someone who'd lived through decades of hard experiences. "That's enough," the old man said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It was the kind of voice that made you listen whether you wanted to or not. Tommy blinked, clearly not expecting this interruption. "Old man, this ain't your business. Why don't you go back to your table and finish your soup or whatever?" The elderly man reached up slowly and adjusted his cap. That's when several people in the restaurant noticed what was embroidered on it. United States Marine Corps, retired. The numbers below indicated he'd served for over 30 years. "I'm making it my business," the old man said. His name was Walter, though most people who'd served with him had called him Colonel. "And I'm telling you right now, you need to sit down and shut your mouth." Bobby laughed nervously. "Come on, Grandpa. We're just having a conversation here." Walter turned his gaze to Bobby, and something about that look made the younger man's smile fade instantly. "A conversation? Is that what you call harassment? Putting your hands on someone's uniform?" He gestured toward James without taking his eyes off Bobby. "You see those ribbons on his chest? You have any idea what they mean?" Tommy tried to step around Walter, but the old man moved his cane to block the path. It wasn't a threatening gesture, but it was effective. "I asked you a question," Walter continued. "Do you know what those medals represent?" "I don't care what they," Tommy started to say. "That purple one with the gold border?" Walter interrupted, his voice getting harder. "That's a Purple Heart. Means he got wounded in combat. That blue one with the white stars? Navy Cross. That's the second highest military decoration for valor. This young man didn't buy these at a surplus store. He earned every single one of them by putting his life on the line." The restaurant was so quiet you could hear the ice settling in people's drinks. Phones continued recording, capturing every word. Some people had tears in their eyes. Others looked angry at Tommy and Bobby. The young manager stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. James remained standing, his posture rigid but controlled. He hadn't expected anyone to come to his defense, especially not another veteran. He could feel his throat tightening with emotion but kept his expression neutral. Tommy's face was red now. Whether from embarrassment or anger or the alcohol, it was hard to tell. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but I know exactly who I am," Walter said, cutting him off again. "I'm a Marine who served 3 tours in Vietnam. I'm someone who watched good men die protecting this country. I'm someone who knows honor and sacrifice. When I see it," he pointed his cane at James, "and I'm someone who won't stand by and watch 2 drunks disrespect a genuine American hero." Bobby put his hand on Tommy's shoulder, trying to pull him back. "Come on, man. Let's just go. This isn't worth it." But Tommy shook him off. "You don't know anything about him. How do you know he's not lying? How do you know?" "Because I can read," Walter said simply. He stepped closer to James and looked at the name tag on his uniform. "Sergeant James Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps." Then he looked at the ribbons more carefully, his old eyes studying each one. Afghanistan deployment ribbon, Iraq campaign medal, combat action ribbon. He turned back to Tommy. This man has seen more combat than you've seen in your wildest nightmares. He's earned the right to sit in this restaurant or any restaurant in this country without being questioned by people like you. A few people in the restaurant started clapping. It began with one person, then another, then a whole section near the windows. The applause grew louder and more people joined in. Tommy looked around, suddenly aware that the entire room was against him. His face went from red to pale as he realized how badly this was going for him. The restaurant owner, an older Italian man named Mr. Romano, finally emerged from the kitchen. He'd been in the back when this started, but his staff had quickly filled him in. He walked up to Tommy and Bobby with his arms crossed. "You two need to leave. Now," Mr. Romano said firmly. "You're not welcome here anymore." Tommy opened his mouth to argue, but the look on everyone's faces told him it would be pointless. Bobby was already backing toward the door, clearly wanting to get out of there. The phones were still recording, and both men seemed to suddenly realize that this incident was probably already spreading online. As they stumbled toward the exit, Walter called out one more time. "Hey," they both turned. "You owe this Marine an apology." The restaurant held its breath again, waiting to see what would happen next. Tommy and Bobby stood frozen near the door, looking like deer caught in headlights. The entire restaurant was staring at them, waiting. Walter's words hung in the air. "You owe this Marine an apology." The silence felt heavy, uncomfortable. You could almost see Tommy's brain working, trying to figure out how to get out of the situation without losing face. Tommy started, then stopped. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Bobby had already pushed the door open halfway, clearly wanting to bolt. But Tommy seemed stuck, caught between his pride and the realization that he'd made a terrible mistake. Before Tommy could say anything else, something unexpected happened. A young woman stood up from her booth near the back. She was wearing medical scrubs with a hospital badge clipped to her pocket. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear when she spoke. "I know him," she said, pointing at James. "I know Sergeant Rodriguez." Every head in the restaurant turned toward her. James looked confused, squinting to see who was speaking. The woman walked forward, weaving between tables until she was standing in the middle of the dining room where everyone could see her. "My brother, Danny, served with Sergeant Rodriguez in Afghanistan," she continued, and now her voice was cracking with emotion. 2 years ago, their convoy got hit by an IED. My brother was trapped in the vehicle, bleeding out. He told me the whole story when he finally came home." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sergeant Rodriguez pulled him out of that burning truck, carried him on his back for 3 miles through enemy territory to reach the evacuation point. 3 miles. In full gear. While being shot at." The woman's voice broke completely now and tears streamed down her face. "My brother is alive today because of this man. He's home with his wife and 2 little girls. Because this Marine wouldn't leave him behind." She looked directly at Tommy. "So don't you dare stand there and question whether he earned that uniform." The restaurant erupted, not in applause this time, but in murmurs of shock and support. Several people were crying. An older gentleman in the corner stood up, removing his baseball cap and placing it over his heart. He had a Vietnam veteran's patch on his jacket. "I served too," the older man said loudly. "Came home to people spitting on me, calling me names. I never got the respect I deserved." He looked at James with watery eyes. "But this young man? He deserves all our respect and more." Then another person stood, a middle-aged Hispanic man in construction clothes. "My son is in the army right now, deployed in Iraq. When I see this sergeant's uniform, I see my son. I see every parent's son or daughter who chose to serve." His voice was firm, angry. "What happened here is disgraceful." One by one, more people started standing. A woman in a business suit, a college student with textbooks on her table, an elderly couple holding hands. They didn't all speak, but their message was clear. They stood with James. They stood against what Tommy and Bobby had done. Bobby had disappeared through the door by now, abandoning Tommy completely. Tommy looked around at all the standing people, at all the phones still recording, at the wall of disapproval facing him. His face had gone from pale to greenish, like he might be sick. I'm sorry," Tommy finally mumbled so quietly that people in the back couldn't hear him. "Louder," Walter said. Look at him and say it like you mean it. Tommy's shoulders slumped. Whatever fight had been in him was completely gone. He turned to face James, and for the first time, there seemed to be genuine shame in his eyes. I'm sorry, Sergeant. I was drunk and stupid, and I said things I shouldn't have said. I was wrong. James stood there for a long moment, studying Tommy's face. Everyone waited to see what he would say, how he would respond. This was the moment the videos would capture, the moment that would define the entire incident. Thank you for the apology, James said quietly. His voice was steady, professional. I accept it. But you need to understand something. He paused, making sure Tommy was really listening. When you disrespect this uniform, you're not just disrespecting me. You're disrespecting every person who ever wore it. Every person who died wearing it. Every family who buried someone wearing it. Tommy nodded, looking at the floor. I understand. I'm sorry, he repeated, and this time it sounded more genuine. Now leave, Mr. Romano said firmly, pointing at the door. And don't come back. Tommy didn't argue. He shuffled toward the exit, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. The moment he was gone, the tension in the room seemed to release like air from a balloon. People started sitting back down, conversations resumed, but everything felt different now. Changed. Walter turned to James and extended his hand. Semper Fi, Sergeant, he said. James shook his hand, and a smile finally broke across his face. The first real smile since he'd walked into the restaurant. Semper Fi, sir, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Mind if an old Marine joins you for lunch? Walter asked. My soup's getting cold over there anyway. I'd be honored, sir, James said. As Walter made his way back to his table to grab his things, the woman in the scrubs approached James. I'm Danny's sister, Lisa. He talks about you all the time. He's going to flip when I tell him I ran into you here. James's eyes widened. Danny Martinez, how is he? Is he doing okay? He's doing great, Lisa said, smiling through her tears. He's a physical therapist now, working with other veterans. He's got a daughter starting kindergarten this year. He always says he's living his second chance thanks to you. James looked like he might start crying himself. I'm so glad to hear that, really. Tell him I said hello. Mr. Romano appeared with 2 menus. Sergeant, your lunch today is on the house. Yours too, Colonel, he said to Walter. It's the least I can do. I'm sorry about what happened here. That's very kind, but not necessary, James said. I insist, Mr. Romano said firmly. And those 2 are banned for life. They'll never set foot in here again. As James and Walter sat down together, the restaurant slowly returned to normal. But phones were still out and people were already posting the videos online. Within the hour, those videos would start spreading. Within a day, millions of people would watch what happened at Romano's family restaurant. But right now, in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was 2 Marines sharing a meal, a sister grateful for her brother's life, and a room full of strangers who chose to stand up for what was right. The next morning, James woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. Text messages, missed calls, notifications flooding in faster than he could read them. Still half asleep, he grabbed his phone from the nightstand and squinted at the screen. His social media apps showed hundreds of notifications. His email inbox had over 200 new messages. Something was definitely wrong. He opened his messages and saw one from his younger sister. It just said, OMG, call me now, with about 15 exclamation marks. Another from his old squad mate read, Bro, you're all over the internet. His mom had sent him a link with the message, Mijo, what happened? Are you okay? James clicked the link his mother sent and his stomach dropped. There he was in his dress blues, standing in Romano's restaurant. The video had been viewed over 3 million times in less than 12 hours. He scrolled down and found another angle, another video, then another. There were at least a dozen different recordings of the same incident, all posted by different people who'd been in the restaurant. The comments section was exploding. Thousands of people sharing the videos, tagging their friends, expressing outrage at what Tommy had done and admiration for how James had handled it. Some comments made him uncomfortable with how much they praised him. He'd just been trying to eat lunch and avoid a fight. He didn't feel the, By noon, the local news stations had picked up the story. A reporter named Christine Park called his phone directly, somehow having gotten his number. Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm with Channel 7 News. We'd love to have you on this evening to tell your side of the story. James politely declined. Then he declined 3 more interview requests. Then 5 more. His commanding officer called to check on him, and mentioned that the base public affairs office was getting calls too. Everyone wanted to talk to the Marine who'd been confronted in the restaurant. What James didn't know was that the story was spreading far beyond his city. News outlets across the country were running segments about it. Morning talk shows were discussing it. Social media influencers were making videos analyzing what happened. The incident had touched something deep in people, sparked conversations about respect, racism, military service, and what it means to stand up for others. By the third day, the videos had been viewed over 50 million times combined. James couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. At the grocery store, people stopped him to shake his hand. At the gas station, someone paid for his fuel anonymously. A woman in the pharmacy cried and hugged him, saying her grandson was in the Navy. Walter called him that afternoon. The older Marine had been dealing with attention too, though he seemed to find it more amusing than overwhelming. "Kid, this is crazy," Walter said with a laugh. "I've had 4 different news crews at my house. My daughter says I'm trending on Twitter. I don't even know what that means." "I just wanted to have lunch," James said, still trying to process everything. "Now my face is everywhere. People are treating me like I did something special, but I didn't do anything except not punch a drunk guy." "That's exactly why this matters," Walter told him. "You showed dignity and restraint when most people would have lost their temper. And you reminded folks that the uniform means something. Whether you meant to or not, you started an important conversation." That conversation was indeed happening everywhere. Schools were using the videos to teach about bullying and standing up for others. Military bases were discussing it in leadership training. Churches were talking about it in sermons about compassion and respect. The incident had become bigger than just what happened in that restaurant. But not all the attention was positive. Some people online were digging into Tommy's background, finding his employer, his address, his family members. They were harassing him, sending threats, trying to destroy his life. James found out about it when a reporter asked him how he felt about Tommy losing his job. "Wait, what?" James said.
"He lost his job?"
The reporter explained that Tommy's employer had seen the videos and fired him within 24 hours. Tommy was also getting death threats. His family was being harassed. The internet mob had decided to punish him, and they weren't stopping. James felt sick. Yeah, Tommy had been wrong. Yeah, what he said was terrible. But James had accepted his apology. He didn't want the man's life ruined. This wasn't justice. This was revenge, and it felt wrong. That evening, James did something he'd been avoiding. He agreed to do one interview with Christine Park from Channel 7, but only on his terms. He wanted to address what was happening to Tommy. Sitting across from Christine under the bright studio lights, James spoke carefully. "What happened in that restaurant was wrong. The things that were said to me were hurtful and disrespectful. But Tommy apologized. He owned his mistake, and I accepted that apology." He looked directly into the camera. "What's happening to him now, the threats and the harassment, that's not okay either." "Two wrongs don't make a right." Christine looked surprised. "So you're defending the man who confronted you?" "I'm not defending what he did," James clarified. "I'm saying that he's a human being who made a mistake." He apologized. "At some point, we have to allow people the chance to learn and grow. Destroying his life doesn't teach him anything except hate." The interview clip went viral too, but this time for different reasons. People started talking about forgiveness and redemption. Some praised James for his compassion. Others argued that Tommy deserved what he got. The conversation became more complex, more nuanced. A week later, James received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Tommy. The handwriting was messy, like it had been written in a hurry or by someone whose hands were shaking. "Dear Sergeant Rodriguez," it began. "I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I wanted to thank you for what you said on TV. I've lost my job, and I'm dealing with a lot of consequences for my actions, but what you said about second chances meant everything to me. I'm going to AA meetings now. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand why I acted that way and make sure it never happens again. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I want you to know that you changed my life that day, and not in the way I expected. Thank you for being a better man than me. Tommy." James read the letter 3 times. He thought about responding but decided against it. Some things didn't need a response. Tommy was on his own journey now, and that was between him and himself. What James didn't realize was that the story was far from over. The real impact of what happened that Saturday afternoon was just beginning to unfold in ways nobody could have predicted. 3 months after the restaurant incident, James was invited to speak at a high school assembly. The principal had seen the videos and thought James's story could inspire the students. He almost said no. Public speaking wasn't his thing, and he still felt weird about all the attention. But something made him say yes. Walking into the gymnasium, he saw hundreds of teenagers sitting in the bleachers, most of them looking bored and scrolling through their phones. James stood at the microphone, suddenly feeling more nervous than he'd felt facing actual combat. At least in combat, he knew what to do. "Hi," he started awkwardly. "I'm Sergeant James Rodriguez. I'm guessing some of you saw the videos from Romano's restaurant." A few kids looked up from their phones. "That was probably the worst lunch I ever tried to have," he said, and a couple students laughed. He told them the whole story, not just what the videos showed, but how he felt. The anger he'd swallowed down, the training that kicked in to keep him calm, the surprise when Walter stood up for him, the confusion when it all went viral. "But here's what I learned from that day," James said, looking out at the sea of young faces. "It's not about me being tough or handling disrespect. It's about the fact that one person decided to stand up, and that gave other people the courage to stand up too. Walter didn't know me. He could have stayed in his seat. But he didn't. And because of that, Lisa stood up. Then others. That's the real story." After the assembly, a skinny kid with glasses approached him. The boy looked nervous, fidgeting with his backpack straps. "Sergeant Rodriguez, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course," James said. "I get bullied a lot," the kid said quietly, looking at the floor. "Every day, actually. These guys in my grade, they push me around, call me names, steal my lunch money. I saw your videos and I kept thinking about how you stayed calm, how you didn't fight back even though you probably could have destroyed those guys." James felt his heart break a little. "What's your name?" "Kevin. Kevin, I'm sorry that's happening to you. Have you told a teacher? Your parents?" "Yeah, but it doesn't really help. It just makes it worse sometimes." Kevin finally looked up. "I just wanted to say thank you. Because when things get bad, I think about you standing there, staying calm, keeping your dignity. It helps me get through it." James didn't know what to say. He'd never thought about his actions affecting a kid dealing with bullies. "You're braver than you know, Kevin. It takes real strength to keep getting up every day when you know it's going to be hard. That's courage, real courage." Kevin smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his whole face. "Thanks, Sergeant. That means a lot." As James drove home that day, he thought about Kevin and all the other people who'd reached out to him over the past few months. Teachers who used the videos in their classrooms. Parents who showed them to their kids. Veterans who said it reminded them why they'd served. The story had taken on a life of its own, meaning different things to different people. Walter had become a regular part of James's life. The two Marines met for lunch every couple of weeks, usually at Romano's, where Mr. Romano still insisted on feeding them for free. They'd swap stories, talk about military life, and laugh about the weird fame they'd both experienced. "Got another speaking request," Walter mentioned over coffee one afternoon. "Some corporate diversity training thing. They want both of us," James groaned. "I'm tired of talking about it, honestly. Can't we just move on?" "We can," Walter said. "But maybe we shouldn't. Not yet, anyway." He leaned back in his chair. "You know how many messages I've gotten from young black kids who want to join the Marines now because they saw you? How many older vets told me they felt seen for the first time in years because someone stood up for a soldier in uniform?" "I know, but—" "And Tommy," Walter interrupted. "You heard he's been doing community service at the VA hospital?" James sat up straighter. "What? No, I didn't know that." "Yeah. He reached out to me a few weeks ago, asked if there was any way he could make amends beyond just apologizing. I told him the VA was always looking for volunteers. He's been going twice a week, helping elderly veterans, cleaning, whatever they need." Walter smiled. "People can change, James. You gave him space to do that." That evening, James got a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, still wary of reporters and random people who'd somehow gotten his contact information. But something made him pick up. "Hello? Sergeant Rodriguez? This is Danny Martinez." James's breath caught. Danny, Lisa's brother. The Marine he'd carried 3 miles in Afghanistan. They'd lost touch after Danny's medical discharge. "Danny, man, how are you? Your sister told me you're doing physical therapy work now." "Yeah, working with wounded vets at Walter Reed, it's amazing." Danny's voice was warm, full of life. "Listen, I saw everything that happened. The videos, your interview, all of it. And I realized I never properly thanked you for saving my life. So I'm doing it now. Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me behind. You don't have to thank me, James said, his voice tight with emotion. That's what we do. We don't leave people behind. I know, but I'm thanking you anyway. Danny paused. And I want you to know something. What you did in that restaurant, staying calm and showing grace, that took more courage than carrying me through a firefight. You showed people what real strength looks like. My daughters are going to grow up knowing that story. Knowing that being strong doesn't mean being violent. It means being dignified and kind even when people don't deserve it. After they hung up, James sat in his quiet apartment, thinking about everything that had happened. The confrontation that started it all. Walter's intervention. The viral videos. Kevin the bullied kid. Tommy's redemption. Danny's call. All of it connected in ways he never expected. His phone buzzed with a text from Walter. Romano's next week? I'm buying. And before you argue, I outrank you. That's an order. James smiled and texted back. Yes, sir. Semper Fi. Semper Fi, Walter replied. James looked at the Purple Heart and Navy Cross sitting on his bookshelf. Medals he'd earned in moments of chaos and violence. But the thing he'd be remembered for was a moment of peace, of choosing calm over anger, dignity over pride. Life was strange that way. The videos would eventually fade from social media. The news cycle would move on. But the impact would remain. In Kevin finding courage to face another day. In Tommy choosing to be better. In countless conversations about respect and redemption happening in homes and schools across the country. James never asked to be a symbol or a viral sensation. He just wanted lunch. But sometimes the smallest moments create the biggest ripples. And sometimes standing still takes more courage than fighting back. That Saturday at Romano's had taught him that sometimes the most important battles are the ones we choose not to fight.